Another episode of Locked On Phillies. And folks, things are getting interesting. It sounds like the Phillies are shopping Alec Bohm. How in the world would this make the team better? We'll discuss on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me from some of my other work in the sports talk space here in Philadelphia. I've been on the radio for 97.5 The Fanatic for 5 years now. I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for 3 seasons of Phillies baseball, and this is my 3rd year as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure you're rating and reviewing if you're consuming this in podcast form. Let me know what you think of the episode and the show, and also subscribing to the YouTube. That'll get you notifications when new episodes are posted. It's also the number one way to help me out. It really helps me make a little more money doing this. It also helps me know, hey, people are enjoying the content, everything like that. And it helps you with, like I said, the new notification. So appreciate everyone who's done that already and who's going to do that. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Folks, the offseason's just starting to get interesting, isn't it? We got reports. So we knew previously, I'll start with this. We knew previously that the Philadelphia Phillies were open to listening on Brandon Marsh, Nick Castellanos, and Alec Bohm. Bob Nightingale had put that out last week, I believe it was, or maybe a little bit more than that. About a week ago, Bob Nightingale let us know that those players, if the Phillies received calls on them, they would be listening. And I was like, okay, well, that's not a crazy thing to hear, right? You've got a couple players that you're not totally sold on. You don't actively want them to leave your team, but hey, if someone picks up the phone with the right deal, you're not totally attached to them. All of that makes perfect sense. That happens with every team in baseball every year. You have guys like that. And sometimes it sounds like they're guys you shouldn't move on from, but you never know. The craziest offer in the world might come down. You might say, okay, sure, go ahead. We'll make that deal. So that's just good front office management. That's good organizational philosophy. Here are the offers for everybody. You can always hang up the phone and say no. And then we get a report today, and Jeff Passan comes out and says, not that the Phillies are listening to offers for Alec Bohm. No, the Phillies are actively shopping Alec Bohm. They're actively looking for trade partners for the all-star third baseman. And that's absolutely, it's shocking to me. I'll tell you, it's honestly shocking to me. Not because I think Alec Bohm is this future MVP caliber guy, but just because of what that could mean for the Philadelphia Phillies in 2025. If you want to go back to my evaluation of Alec Bohm, I break down everything, right? You can scroll back through the videos. I break down what I think of his season, what I think of his future, why I don't think the Philadelphia Phillies should trade him, because I don't think they'll be better for trading him. Because what this comes down to is, if you have an all-star caliber, arbitration eligible 28-year-old third baseman that nears 100 RBIs every year, your team is likely not better if you move on from that player. It just doesn't make sense to me why they would move on from him. Now, I know why that conversation even exists, and that's twofold. The reasons why the Phillies are considering a trade of Alec Bohm. Because, one, you look at a guy and you say, okay, well, we don't love the attitude sometimes. He seems mopey. He seems like he gets down on himself. He kills the clubhouse vibe. You saw that when Edmundo Sosa was started at third base in the second game of the postseason for Alec Bohm. You have an all-star at third base, and you're not starting him 2 games into the postseason, or rather 1 game into the postseason. Like, that's immediate red flag. Alarm bells should have gone off in people's heads at that point, and it did for a lot of Philadelphia Phillies fans. But I didn't know it was to the point where they would look to trade him. Not consider it. Like, they're looking to move Alec Bohm. That's shocking to me. The other part of that is that in the biggest moments for the Philadelphia Phillies, he has been a non-factor. He's got really good numbers early on in the season, and then the second half rolls around, and those numbers taper off. And then in the moments where it matters most, Alec Bohm is a no-show in the postseason, or at least he has been over the past couple of seasons. Now, again, still young. And I do believe there's a world where Alec Bohm turns his clutch ability in the postseason around. Like, I don't think the narrative forever is going to be this guy can't hit in October, but it may be. I don't know. I'm assuming because I see how good he is in the regular season and how quality of the bats he puts together and how big time of a player he's been for the Philadelphia Phillies offensively. And he's been solid enough defensively. So those are the reasons why you would think about moving Alec Bohm. It's not performance based on face value, right? It's not his stats are not where you want him to be. It's the moments and the attitude. And those are fair criticisms. But let's look at what could happen, right? Because part of this conversation is how in the world do the Philadelphia Phillies get better from this move? Why would the Philadelphia Phillies look to do this and believe they have a better chance at competing? So we're going to break that down. By the way, later on in the episode, coming up next, we're going to talk about a shakeup in the front office for the Philadelphia Phillies. It's something very, very interesting. And we're still going to do just a final short segment of the Taiwan Walker 2024 evaluation. That'll probably be a very, very quick explanation. But anyway, back to the Alec Bohm thing. So there's a couple ways I can see this working out for the Philadelphia Phillies where they look at it and they say, we could be better because of this move. The first thing is they believe that they could trade Alec Bohm for a player at a different position where it may be more valuable to their team. Now, this one to me seems the least likely because what do the Phillies really need right now? They don't really need starting pitching. They don't really need bullpen pitching. They could add a little bit more to the bullpen, but you could do that through free agency. I think you still have some plus arms. And if you bring back either Jeff Hoffman or Carlos Estevez, you could be totally fine in the bullpen, right? You'd want to add, but you still have a great bullpen. You want to add to the outfield. Is it as simple as we trade Bohm, we get an outfielder back? Maybe. But that feels like a weird move. Feels like you'd much more likely move Brandon Marsh in that situation. So the team is getting an outfielder back so they have someone that they can project out, or maybe Yohan Rojas. But I don't know. That is, I guess, possible. Some people have brought up Devin Williams from Milwaukee. You get a back-end reliever. Guy's expensive. I don't know if that makes your team better. You're adding to payroll so that you're reducing your chances to sign free agents and add to the team. You're just swapping out parts and costing yourself more, which doesn't feel like a great strategy for the Philadelphia Phillies right now. They could also say, hey, there's someone in free agency that we really like. We can move Alec Bohm. We can move him for whatever, find guys that fit this team, but then you need a third baseman replacement. So who's that guy? There's only one dude available in free agency that is remotely the caliber of Alec Bohm at third base right now, and that's Alex Bregman. Here's the thing. Bregman's going to cost you a lot of money. Are you willing to upgrade your payroll at that position so much to bring in a guy like Alex Bregman, who's an older player now? And it doesn't feel like it, right? Because every time you see him with Houston, he seems like he's getting big hits and in his prime and everything, but he's an older player now. You could bring in Alex Bregman, but you're getting a guy on the back end of his career as opposed to a guy that could still be on the ascension in Alec Bohm. He's also, like we talked about with Devin Williams, he's a guy that's going to cost you a boatload of money. You're going to have to go pay him. Alec Bohm is still, he could be arbitration like at $8 million this year. That's not going to be a price that you get for a player at that caliber. So I don't really get how that makes you. The only way that makes you better is you say, we need to bring in somebody else here who knows how to win, who we know that in the postseason, they're ready to go. And Bregman is pretty darn safe of a bet when it comes to that because of all of his time in Houston. We'll have to get over the trash can stuff because there's that bad taste in everybody who's a baseball fan's mouth about the way that Houston won one of their titles. But still, Bregman is undeniably a guy that performs in October. Maybe they could say, hey, we're willing to pay for the upgrade when it matters most, for a slight downgrade over the rest of the season if it does play out that way. Okay, that makes sense. Then there's one final option that doesn't involve free agency and doesn't involve a trade. And this may be the most intriguing. And it's probably the least likely. But let's just throw it out there just in case. If the Philadelphia Phillies are shopping Alec Bohm, is there a chance that they look at Aiden Miller, their young stud third baseman prospect, who people still think he's another year or two away? Could they think he's ready now? Could the Philadelphia Phillies be looking at Aiden Miller and say, hey, kid, you about ready to go give us your best? You're going to bring up a guy that is just like is significantly younger than anybody else on this roster and put him on a roster where they've got World Series expectations, playing hot corner in Philadelphia, where we saw what it did to Alec Bohm mentally when he made mistakes at that position, where he was saying this and that and the other thing under his breath about the fans. Do they think the kid's ready for that? I don't think that's likely. But I got to be honest, the Bohm thing feels like kind of a weird decision by the Philadelphia Phillies to shop him actively. Maybe they do think Aiden Miller has a shot to make the team and play third base in 2025. Again, long shot, but how cool would that be, right? And I trust Dave Dombrowski's evaluation of players, and I trust their minor league systems development, and we're going to talk about that a bunch coming up in our next segment when we talk about the front office shakeup that happened. But it would be it's a long shot. It'd be like winning the lottery as a Phillies fan. It's a long shot, but if it does happen, how darn cool would that be to get Aiden Miller up here? And if he was everything we thought he could be, well, you have your third baseman in the next 15 years over there alongside your shortstop in the next 7 to 8 years and your first baseman in the next however long with Bryce Harper, and hopefully Bryce Stott's that guy. So weird news, something to keep an eye on. It doesn't mean he's going to get traded. It doesn't mean the Phillies are like, he's burning a hole in our pocket, but they've gone from listening to shopping when it comes to Alec Bohm. There's a real chance that he's not in red pinstripes next season, folks, and that's something that I did not think was going to happen. We'll see if it indeed does. Coming up next, we're going to discuss a change in the front office for the Philadelphia Phillies, and this is not like the guy who gets Dave Dombrowski coffee. No, they made legitimate organizational announcements, and it's something that I think is really intriguing for the future of what this organization could be. We'll talk about it coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Let's talk about GameTime first. GameTime is absolutely awesome for you to find tickets to your favorite events. And GameTime has a new feature called GameTime Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Or getting tickets to comedy, concerts, theater, all that great stuff. GameTime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. It's got great curation that makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, all kinds of stuff that you need tickets for. Plus, GameTime has all-in pricing that it's known for. You toggle this feature, it shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. They also have the GameTime guarantee, which means if you find a seat in the same row and section for less, GameTime's going to give you 110% of the difference. They're going to find you for finding a better deal, or they're going to find you. They're going to pay you. They're not going to track you down. They're going to pay you for finding a better deal than what they give you on their site. And with GameTime ticket coverage, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. GameTime's just like, it's hands down the best way to buy tickets for anything. And there's a lot of great things in Philadelphia all the time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime Picks. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? It's game time. All right. This might seem like a why in the world are you talking about it? Why should we care? I'm going to tell you why you should care about why the Philadelphia Phillies and how the Philadelphia Phillies shook up their front office. Now, you know the structure, right? The structure of what matters in the Phillies front office. If you are a Philadelphia Phillies fan, you probably know these two names. You got Dave Dombrowski at the top, president of baseball operations. And then under Dave Dombrowski is Sam Fuld, the GM. Now, it's confusing for some people because this whole president of baseball operations thing became this new position over the past, I don't know, what decade that used to be occupied by GMs. And some teams still just have a GM. Some teams have POBOs, presidents of baseball operations, which I love to call POBOs because it's a fun way to call it. Some teams have one guy do all of that. Some teams split it. The Phillies, in Dave Dombrowski's tenure, have had him as president of baseball operations. Everything runs up through him. The final decision is made by that guy, and rightfully so, because he is a future Hall of Fame executive. And then Sam Fuld is the general manager. So he handles a lot of stuff, but mainly the major league roster is handled by Dave Dombrowski, calls on that. And Sam Fuld will handle stuff with the 40-man, and we'll work on stuff with trades, and we'll work on stuff with scouting, and we'll work on stuff with drafting, and we'll work on stuff with minor leagues, and Dave Dombrowski's focus is the major league roster, but they work in tandem on a lot of stuff. And a lot of people see Sam Fuld as a guy that Dave Dombrowski is looking at to say, hey, when I'm out of here, it's your gig. So that's what happens when you work as the GM under the president of baseball operations with the tenure that Dave Dombrowski has and the pedigree and all of that is it's like, oh, you see it as he's grooming him to be the next Dave Dombrowski, whether that's in Philadelphia, whether someone else poaches him. Makes total sense. That's how everything works. A vice president is assistant vice president or whatever they call it in business. You could tell I haven't been in office in a long time doing sports talk radio, but you put the person next to you who you are training to get your job, right? And that's just how it naturally works. Well, Sam Fuld is no longer going to be like the true GM of the baseball team. He is going to business school and then is going to work on the business operations side for the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, business operations is a very important part of Major League Baseball that we as fans don't really care about, right? We care about who are you trading for? Who's going to play third base? Who's going to be in our starting rotation? How close can you get us to winning the World Series? How much money are you going to pay players? We care about what's on the field. But there's a lot more that goes into the job of front office members than just what's on the field. Making the money work, making the revenue work, finding out all of the stuff about how a club operates. It's not just John Middleton running all of that himself. There are different things that fall on the front office of the team, the brain trust, that are not just, hey, this is the player that we want you to draft or sign or trade for. So Sam Fuld, probably thinking it will make him more well-rounded, is going to explore the business side of things. In some cases, this would be a demotion. In this case, it seems to be a, hey, learn more about this because I know you know a good amount about this. It seems to be a try something new so that when you eventually get this major promotion you're looking for, you have the opportunity to know more about the whole operation, right? It doesn't seem like a bad thing for Sam Fuld. I don't think the Phillies are unhappy with what he's done as the GM of this team. On the contrary, I think they've been very happy with the pairing of Sam Fuld and Dave Dombrowski. But Sam Fuld is not losing his title, technically. He's still going to be a general manager for the Philadelphia Phillies. You might say, what? The plan is for them to have two GMs. And it's not a snap, happen today type of thing. It's not like tomorrow, Sam Fuld is the GM of business, and there's another dude who's the GM of baseball. Like, no, it's going to happen. It's going to be a gradual transition as people get more in tune with different roles and everything like that. There's a guy on the business side that's retiring that Sam Fuld is going to take on a lot of his responsibilities, so it fills the need for the Phillies. You might say, well, why does any of this matter to Locked On Phillies and baseball and the team that I watch? Like, why should I care? Well, because Sam Fuld could be the guy making the decisions for this team, and you should know what he's doing, but also because of the guy that is taking over in Sam Fuld's position. Now, the GM on the baseball side of the equation is going to be one Preston Mattingly. Now, if you'll remember, the Philadelphia Phillies brought in Preston Mattingly to work with their minor league system. He was a guy that was highly touted around baseball, that the Phillies gave him a better position than where he had held positions previously. And they said, dude, you're going to run our minor league development. Puts him in charge of everything from rookie ball on. It happens. Preston Mattingly gets the credit or he gets the blame. And recently, it's been a lot of credit. Guys like Andrew Painter, Mick Abel, Justin Crawford, Aiden Miller, these big name guys, some of them seem to be more ready to work out than others. Guys that have come up, Yohan Rojas, Christopher Sanchez, guys like this that have been in the Philadelphia Phillies minor leagues, at least to some extent, and get developed more and turn into players at the major league level. Well, Preston Mattingly deserves credit for that over the past couple of years. And he's done a really good job. And of course, you know, with the last name Mattingly, he comes with that baseball pedigree that everybody loves. And he's an incredibly sharp guy when it comes to developing players. So now you have him coming up and taking over what Sam Fuld used to do in some ways. And this doesn't mean Sam Fuld is restricted from talking to Dave Dombrowski or anything. I'm sure he'll still be in conversations over this offseason and going forward if they need to bounce stuff off each other. But now Preston Mattingly is a GM. So the Phillies have a president of baseball operations and two GMs. Sam Fuld still seems like the guy that's going to take over for the guy, right? He seems like the successor to Dave Dombrowski in the future. But the Preston Mattingly thing is interesting, and it's good news for the Phillies because the fact that you're moving a guy up in the organization means he's done a good job and proved to be valuable. When you hire from outside of an organization in any line of work, that says the people we have in-house, I don't think they're ready for this job. I don't think we've done a good enough job of preparing someone. I don't think we have someone capable. We got to go steal someone from someone else, from somewhere else. And if that keeps happening, you worry about an organization's ability to evaluate talent and grow talent, not just on the field, but in the front office. The Phillies have done an amazing job of that, acquiring Preston Mattingly, giving him opportunity and reaping the benefits. And now he gets another step up. So it's another name for you to really know if you're going to worry about who makes these decisions for the Phillies. And with Alec Bohm being shopped, I mean, that's already a big decision that we're going to have to start looking at and say, well, who's doing this and why, and who do we point to, and who's going to answer for it? So that's why this is important. That's another name to know. The three-headed monster now of the Philadelphia Phillies front office is Dombrowski at the top, Sam Fuld moving into a new role, Preston Mattingly receiving that promotion. So just a little bit of clerical stuff that really, really does matter in baseball organizations that could shape the future of the Phillies, because one of those two guys is probably going to be your next president of baseball operations, Fuld or Mattingly. And whoever it is, well, you see how big of an impact they can have. So just a little bit of information on that. Now I guess we have to do it, right? We have to evaluate Taijuan Walker's 2024 season. We're at the back end of the rotation. We're ready to move on to the bullpen. He gets one segment, and it'll be a quick one as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. All right, let's talk about FanDuel, though. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5, just $5, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if you win. So what do you do with that $5? Well, I would say pick something that seems to be a sure bet. Pick a team that's like a 20-point favorite somewhere in college basketball. Say $5 money line. They're not going to lose. They might not cover, but they're not going to lose. And then you get $150 in bonus bets. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, this should be interesting. We're going to evaluate Taijuan Walker's 2024 season. This is a pretty simple evaluation. We had him setting new records for runs allowed and consecutive starts lost and all this stuff for the first time since like the 1800s or whatever it was. And all the guys with the funny names, Tungsten Arm O'Doyle and all those dudes and all his buddies, we were having Taijuan Walker. He's like the worst pitcher in this stat since this guy. And that's never a good sign. And he couldn't eat innings, and he couldn't find his stuff, and he couldn't get velocity, and he had, I don't know, dead arm or just completely crap arm or whatever you want to call it. I'm going to say this up front before I go on with this evaluation. I do feel for the guy, right? I feel for Taijuan Walker, the individual. I don't think this was a lack of effort. I don't think this was him giving up on the team. If you give up on the Philadelphia Phillies, I don't feel any sympathy for you. If your career falls apart in front of you because you're just washed, which it seems like Taijuan Walker is, I feel bad for the player, right? I do. It sucks to get to that point in your career where you're just like, I can't cut it anymore. And you want to help your team and you can't. That sucks. And I'm not saying he's a bad person. And I'm not saying I hate him. And I'm not saying anything about who he is as a man, right? I feel for the guy. That out of the way. He was absolutely god-awful in 2024. Like, he was terrible. It was one of the worst starting pitching seasons that I've ever seen in my life. He was miserable. If you had told me partway through the season, you could have Vince Velasquez or you could have Taijuan Walker. You could have Spencer Howard or you could have Taijuan Walker. You could have the ghost of Vance Worley, wherever that guy is these days, the Vanimal. Or you could have Taijuan Walker. I would have taken just about any pitcher on the planet with an active pulse over Taijuan Walker. He was that bad. He was absolutely miserable. The evaluation is very, very simple for Taiwan Walker. He gets an F based on expectations. He gets an F based on comparison to other pitchers. It just completely failure. If there was a lower grade, I'd give it to him. All right. He was just so terrible. I can't imagine anybody having a worse season for their required role and their contract. We're going to talk about that in a second. Then Taijuan Walker. He was just flat out abysmal in 2024. There's no other ways I could say it. I can't wait till he is no longer a member of the Philadelphia Phillies, not because, once again, of the guy he is, because of the pitcher he's been. But he still has a pretty darn big contract, and he still has 2 years left on that contract. And you still have to figure out exactly what you want to do with Taijuan Walker and if you're going to eat 2 years of salary to move him off this baseball team. So I guess the main question is, what does the future hold for Taijuan Walker? How do they move on? Well, I don't think the way that they handled it this past year was poorly handled, right? They had him make another start down the stretch when you were already basically clinched into the division title and the postseason berth and everything to try and eat up innings so that you could save the arms of the guys that you were actually going to throw in the postseason. No problem with that. I have no issue with that. It makes sense. They said, hey, bro, go. We're not even expecting you to not give up runs. We're just expecting you to go get outs, get us outs closer to the postseason without us wasting any of our more important arms. And he did it. And they kept him on the team through the end of the year without like completely outright releasing him. Some people were like, well, why is he still on the team? Because if you could get anything, even like eating innings, even like one out, it's better than just eating the money and getting him out of there when you're already at the point where it's just like, well, you're going to make the postseason. You're going to be locked into this seeding. Basically, you're going to win the division. So you just need to wait out. You need to run out the clock, basically, to use a football term or a basketball term. And that was what Taijuan Walker was. He could still run out the clock for them. So that's why you don't move on from him in the 2024 regular season. Then the postseason, he's not going to pitch, whatever. You don't have to worry about that. But now we're in the offseason. So what do? Do you move on from him this offseason? No, you don't. And here's why. Because you're going to have to pay that money to him anyway. So are you going to pay him not to work? No, you're not going to do that. Are you going to guarantee him a spot? Absolutely not. And Dave Dombrowski said as much in his end of the year media availability. He's like, there's no guarantees. We'll let him come to camp and try and win a spot, but he's not locked into anything. He had a terrible year. Well, Dave Dombrowski didn't say that last part. I did. That's me editorializing. But that's why Dave Dombrowski said what he did. So why would you not get rid of him? Well, because it doesn't cost you anything to bring him to spring training. It doesn't cost you anything to allow him to go to Clearwater and say, okay, let's see what you worked on in the offseason. Let's see how you look. Let's see if you give us anything good. Let's see if we can find a role for you on this team. Let's give you a true look at trying to be a competitive pitcher again. It could be a long reliever. It could be he's ready to be a starter again. The fan base isn't going to trust him, but the organization is going to evaluate him. And they're going to see if he's able to put you in a position where you put him on the team. And if you don't, well, then you release him and you cost yourself the same amount of money. But at least you gave yourself an ample chance to see if you could squeeze any more juice out of that lemon. And if you can't, you can't. And you still cost yourself the same amount of money if you cut him now. So take the chance. It's a risk-free bet, right, basically. And you go ahead and then decide if he's not good enough, you cut him, you eat your losses, you pay the money. But they're not going to do it before spring training because they want to see if there's anything that they can do. Now, it may be trying to get blood from a stone. And if that's the case, well, at least you tried. But it doesn't cost you anything to keep him on this team till spring training, like through spring training. But I'd be very, very surprised if he was in the rotation. I'd be very, very surprised if he was on the roster. I'd be shocked if he played any type of a role for the Philadelphia Phillies in 2025. Effectively, his career with the Philadelphia Phillies is over, which is a shame considering the contract, and it sucks how much money they threw at a guy who gave you basically nothing. But there's no reason to just cut him loose now. It makes zero sense to do that. So don't freak out when you see Taijuan Walker getting a spring training invite and throwing down in Clearwater. When we do freak out is if he makes the team. And I don't think that he will. I think that spot will go to Andrew Painter or a combination of Andrew Painter and somebody they signed this offseason. But we'll see how that goes as the weeks and months progress. That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. A jam-packed one, man. A lot of news. Did not think we were going to have this busy of a day, but heck, when they say you're trying to trade your all-star starting third baseman yeah, that takes precedence over everything else that we're going to talk about. But thank you for joining us. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating and reviewing and subscribing to the YouTube. All that stuff we talked about at the start of the episode. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me now. If you enjoyed today's episode, costs you nothing, gets notifications when new episodes are posted. Appreciate that very much. Tomorrow, well, we'll start our evaluation of the Philadelphia Phillies bullpen, unless I find out they're trying to train another star player. But no, we'll jump into the bullpen, and I'll have to decide who I'm going to start with. Maybe we'll go alphabetical. Maybe we'll go ERA. Maybe we'll just randomly pick guys from the roster. But tune in tomorrow to find out who the first bullpen pitcher I evaluate is, and just for more great Phillies talk on our next episode of Locked On Phillies.